We barely made it out. The secondary tunnel led to a hidden exit beneath a maintenance shed behind the building. We emerged coughing, shaking, covered in dirt, but we were alive, and we had everything. The next few hours moved like a blur. We sent the data to journalists, independent investigators, and online whistleblower platforms. We uploaded footage, names, bank accounts, everything Shevchenko had tried to hide beneath the city. And then, we waited. For hours, it was silent. Then, everything exploded. News stations picked up the leak. Social media caught fire. The videos we had risked our lives to capture began circulating, sparking outrage, horror, disbelief. People demanded answers. Government officials scrambled to respond. Whispers of internal investigations began. And police cars started swarming the building. But we weren't there anymore. We'd gone to the one place we swore never to return, the nest. Because even as the world reacted, we knew one thing: he was still alive. And if they arrested him, he'd vanish again, into cracks, into walls, into silence. So we brought the one thing that ended his reign once before. Fire. We drenched the tunnels in gasoline. Every hallway. Every hidden room. Every cursed screen and blood-stained wall. Then we lit the match. The flames roared to life like they'd been waiting for this, devouring the dark, purging the silence. The fire rose through the tunnels like vengeance, swallowing the nest whole. We never saw him again. Maybe he burned with it. Maybe he escaped, a shadow, slipping through cracks, waiting to rebuild. But one thing changed forever: the city saw him now. His secrets weren't hidden anymore. And for the first time in years, Alia and I walked away, hand in hand, not as victims, but as survivors. The staircase spiraled downward, deeper than any normal building should allow. The walls turned from concrete to stone. Mold grew thick in the corners. The only sound was our breath and the soft hum of distant machinery, like something alive was stirring below. Each step felt heavier than the last. After what felt like forever, we reached the bottom. A corridor stretched ahead, lit by flickering fluorescent bulbs, humming like dying insects. The air was thick with rot and something even worse, despair. Then we saw it. A massive metal door, marked by the same jagged symbol we'd seen on the tapes. But this time, it was carved into the steel, not scratched, like a badge of honor. We pushed it open slowly. Inside was the nest. A massive underground hall, with surveillance monitors lining the walls. Screens flickered with static, footage from rooms like the one we had found earlier. There were dozens of them, hidden chambers beneath other buildings. All connected. All active. It was bigger than we'd feared. Desks. Files. Laptops. A control center for horror. And in the middle, a chair. Empty. But still warm. "He was just here," Alia whispered. We searched everything, copying files, taking photos, trying to download as much as we could. But my hands were shaking. Every corner of this place felt like it could reach out and swallow us whole. Then, we heard it. Footsteps. Slow. Heavy. Deliberate. I grabbed Alia's hand. We backed into the shadows. A tall figure entered, wearing the sack mask, just like in the tapes. Yuri Shevchenko. Older now. Slower. But still powerful. He walked to the chair, sat, and began reviewing footage like it was just another day at work. Then, he paused. Turned. And whispered, "You're not supposed to be here." I froze. He stood slowly. Reached under the desk. I ran. We dashed through the tunnels, taking a different exit we'd spotted on the map. Behind us, alarms blared. Red lights flashed. Voices echoed. He wasn't alone. But we had what we needed. Proof. And we were still alive, for now. I rushed home with the USB clutched in my pocket like it was a beating heart. Alia was waiting by the window, wide-eyed and pale. I didn't speak, just plugged it into the laptop and waited. Inside were dozens of folders. Videos. Scans of police reports. hidden bank transfers, surveillance stills. It was all real, a web of names and dates stretching back years. Victims, accomplices, buyers. And at the center of it all, Yuri Shevchenko. The files painted a picture more horrifying than anything we'd imagined. Yuri wasn't just a lone killer. He was the architect of an underground network, feeding footage of torture and murder to wealthy clients around the world. Some of the videos had been traced to black market forums, encrypted live streams, digital auctions. But one folder stood out. It was labeled, The Nest. Inside were floor plans. Not of our apartment, but of the entire building. Hidden tunnels, service shafts, blind spots in the camera system, and a basement that shouldn't exist. He built this place around himself, I whispered. Like a spider's web. Alya's voice trembled. Then he's still here. Somewhere below. That night, we gathered everything, the files, the photos, the journal, and created copies. We sent them to 3 trusted friends, with instructions, if anything happens to us, go public. It was all or nothing now. The next day, we followed the last clue, a blueprint showing a sealed stairwell behind the basement laundry room. It wasn't on any city map. Covered by a wall of broken shelves and discarded furniture. We cleared it. And found the door. Steel. Thick. With fresh fingerprints on the handle. No sound came from behind it. No movement. Just a feeling, heavy and pressing, that something was waiting. I looked at Alya. She nodded once. We opened it. The air hit us like a slap, damp, warm, and pulsing with electricity. And somewhere below, in the bowels of that forgotten stairwell, a light turned on. We left the apartment just before midnight, the city eerily quiet around us. Alya stayed behind, I insisted. If it was a trap, I'd rather face it alone. The location was vague, but I had a feeling I knew where to go. The old rail yard at the city's edge. A place long abandoned, swallowed by weeds and forgotten steel. It was cold when I got there. Silent. The wind hissed through rusted train cars like whispers through teeth. I kept my flashlight low, scanning shadows, heart pounding. And then, a figure stepped out. A man, hooded, face mostly hidden behind a scarf and glasses. He looked thin, brittle, like someone who hadn't slept properly in years. You found the room, he said. I nodded. You left the note. You survived him. He paused. Then slowly nodded. Barely. I asked his name. He didn't give it. But he told me everything else. He'd been a student when Shevchenko lured him in, posing as a landlord renting cheap basement units. The man was charming, at first. Calm. But the trap came fast, drugged food, locked doors, and then, the room. He escaped only because of a fire, the one from the records. He said it himself. Tried to burn Yuri alive. But somehow, Shevchenko vanished. I thought he died, the survivor said. But the city has cracks. He crawled back in. He'd been hiding ever since. Following rumors. Watching people disappear. Always one step behind, never brave enough to go back. Until we did. He's not just one man anymore, the survivor said, voice low. He's a network now. People in the police. Others in the shadows. He trades in suffering. Records it. Sells it. They protect him because they're part of it. I felt cold in my bones. How do we stop him? The man looked at me for a long time. Then handed me a USB drive. Proof. Names. Faces. But it won't be enough. If you want to end this, you have to go deeper. He turned to leave, then stopped. He knows who you are now. And he doesn't forgive. We hurried back up through the tunnel, locking the hatch behind us like it could protect us from what we'd just discovered. The idea that Yuri Shevchenko was still alive, still active, clung to me like wet cloth. Worse than that, he wasn't alone. According to the note, he had friends. That night, we scanned every photo from the tunnel walls, looking for connections. Alia cross-referenced faces from the folders with missing persons databases, while I searched for any mention of Shevchenko in forums, blogs, conspiracy threads, anything. Hours passed. Nothing. Silence. Until, around 3 a.m., I heard it. A soft scraping sound. I froze. It came from the wall near the kitchen, faint but unmistakable. Like fingers dragging along the inside of drywall. I tiptoed closer. Alia followed silently. And then, a whisper. Just one word. Muffled. Faint. Watching. We backed away slowly. I grabbed the flashlight, turned off all the lights, and scanned the walls. That's when we saw it. Near the ceiling, above the cabinets, was a tiny hole. Just big enough for an eye. I felt Bao rise in my throat. He was in the walls. Or had been. We tore open that section the next morning and found a narrow service crawl space running through the structure of the building, untouched for decades, never sealed off. He could have been anywhere. Listening. Watching. Coming and going as he pleased. That's when we made the second decision that would change everything. We left a message in the same place we found the last note. Slipped it into the mattress in the chamber, hoping the survivor would return. It read, "We found your note. We know he's alive. We want to stop him. Please, if you're still out there, contact us. We'll be waiting. Apartment 4D. And we waited. 4 days. Until one morning, taped to our door with surgical precision, we found an envelope. Inside it was a single sentence. Meet me where the city ends. Midnight. Come alone. And we knew the survivor was ready to talk. We stood in front of the door, breathless. The name etched into the metal stared back at us like a warning carved by time itself. Yuri Shevchenko. I looked at Alia. Her hand trembled slightly as she reached out to touch the cold surface. Do we open it? She whispered. We have to, I said. With a deep breath, I pushed the door open. Inside, we found what looked like an old sleeping chamber, if you could call it that. A mattress on the floor, stained and torn. Empty food cans. Walls covered in newspaper clippings and Polaroids. It looked like someone had lived here, recently. But the most chilling part wasn't the room. It was the journal on the floor. Worn, its leather cover cracked and peeling, the pages inside filled with ramblings in dark ink. Some were nonsense, words repeated over and over. She sees me. She sees me. She sees me. But deeper in the journal, the writing became more coherent. One entry in particular froze me. March 12th. They tried to burn me out. Thought the fire would end me. But I went deeper. The tunnels go far, farther than they know. I am part of this city now. A shadow beneath their feet. I still have work to do. They all forget. But I never forget. And I never forgive. Alia found another piece of paper tucked in the mattress, a crumpled, blood-stained note. Different handwriting. It read, If you find this, I escaped. Barely. He lives in the walls. He watches. He listens. Don't trust the police. He has friends. I'm hiding. Please stop him. There was no name. No date. But it meant one terrifying thing. Someone else had survived. And if they were still alive, they might be our only hope. We have to find them, Alia said. I nodded. But I couldn't shake the feeling that we weren't alone down here anymore. Something was watching us. From the shadows. We barely slept that night. Every creak in the apartment made us flinch. Every gust of wind outside felt like footsteps returning to finish what they started. But despite the fear, something stronger had taken hold, determination. The next morning, Alia dug into public records while I scoured the tapes, frame by frame, for anything we could use. License plates. Faces. Symbols. Anything. And then, in the fourth tape, we saw him. Not clearly, not at first. Just a silhouette reflected in a mirror on the wall behind the table. Tall. Broad-shouldered. Wearing a mask, like a sack stitched crudely together, with 2 eye holes and a jagged smile drawn in red ink. But it was enough. He wanted to be seen. Alia gasped when I froze the frame. He was filming himself on purpose. Yeah, I muttered. He wasn't hiding. He was leaving a message. That afternoon, she found something, a fire that had happened in our building 10 years ago. Apartment 4B. The official report blamed faulty wiring. 1 casualty. A tenant named Yuri Shevchenko. But there was no obituary. No family listed. Just a photo of the charred remains of a unit filled with strange tools. The room looked eerily similar to the one we had found underground. Do you think? Alia whispered. He didn't die in that fire? Maybe the fire was a cover, I said. Maybe someone tried to erase him. We needed more. So we made a decision that felt like crossing a line. That night, we returned to the tunnel. But this time, we followed a different path, a narrow corridor behind the killing room, hidden behind a collapsed shelf. It led deeper into darkness, and as we moved forward, the air got colder, staler, more rotten. Until finally, we reached another door. This one had a name scratched into the metal. Yuri Shevchenko. My blood turned to ice. He hadn't been a victim. He was the monster. We stood frozen in that underground room, hearts pounding. The smell was unbearable, a mix of rust, old mold, and something sour, something wrong. Alia covered her nose with her sleeve. My flashlight shook in my hand as I scanned the walls. Chains hung like vines. Rusted blades lined a long wooden shelf. One corner of the room held a stack of VHS tapes, dusty and unlabeled. Another had a rotting cabinet with faded folders inside. I don't think this was abandoned, I said slowly. I think someone's still using it. Alia's eyes widened. Then they'll come back. We didn't have long. I grabbed a few tapes and folders, stuffing them into my backpack. Alia took photos of the room with her phone, just in case. Every sound in the tunnel behind us felt like footsteps. We got out and sealed the hatch again. This time from the inside and the outside. Back upstairs, we locked every door and window. Only then did we finally breathe again. But we didn't stop. We couldn't. We pulled out the tapes and folders and spread them across the floor. The first folder was a file on a missing person, a girl named Vika Melnik. 19 years old. Vanished 2 years ago. There were photos, a copy of her ID, even newspaper clippings. The second folder held similar reports, at least 6 victims. All of them had been reported missing. None ever found. We didn't need to watch the tapes to know what they held. But we did. The screen filled with static. Then a room. That room. A girl strapped to the table, crying, pleading. Alia turned away, sick. I shut it off. This wasn't just a maniac, I whispered. He was documenting it. For someone? She asked. Or for himself. Either way, one thing was clear. We had just found a serial killer's lair. And the police? They'd known. Maybe they were even protecting it. But why? We had no answers yet. Just fear. And a burning need to find the truth. The next morning, we were quiet. We moved through the apartment like ghosts, brushing our teeth in silence, drinking coffee without tasting it. Alia kept glancing toward the hallway, where the hatch had been covered with a wooden board nailed shut. I knew she was thinking the same thing I was. We couldn't let it go. By noon I had a plan. I pulled out my toolbox and stood in front of the boarded hatch. Alia didn't stop me. She just nodded once, pale but determined. We'll go together, she said. If there's more down there, we'll find it. It took less than 10 minutes to pry the boards off. The hatch gaped open again, like a mouth. We climbed down, both of us armed with heavy-duty flashlights this time. But the tunnel had changed. The sacks were gone, of course. But now, further down the path, there was a new door. Steel. Heavy. Set into the stone like it had always been there, but we hadn't seen it before. Did they install that? Alia asked, voice tight. No. They couldn't have. Not in one night. The door had no handle, just a slot, like something out of an old asylum. But it wasn't locked. It creaked open slowly when I pushed. What we saw beyond that door was worse than anything we'd imagine. A room. Large. Cold. Lined with tools. Blades. Chains. Tables. And a camera set up on a tripod still pointed toward a stained metal table in the center. This wasn't a storage space. It was a workshop. A killing room. And on the wall, scratched into the concrete in what looked like dried blood, were the words, "The city forgot, but I never left." Alia grabbed my arm, hard. "We need to know who did this," she whispered. And I nodded. Because we weren't just victims anymore. We were hunters. The police arrived within 20 minutes. They sealed off the apartment, brought in flashlights and evidence bags, and questioned us for hours, the kind of questioning that makes you feel more like a suspect than a witness. We told them everything, the hatch, the tunnel, the sacks, the body parts. But something about the officers felt off. One of them, a tall man with graying hair and cold eyes, barely reacted when he looked inside the bags. He just zipped them up again, muttered something into his radio, and walked off like he'd seen it all before. No surprise. No urgency. Alia whispered to me, "Why aren't they shocked?" I didn't know. But I was starting to realize they weren't interested in answers, they were interested in control. By morning the sacks were gone. The tunnel had been boarded up. And 2 detectives in cheap suits informed us that the case was being handled, but they wouldn't share any details. "What do you mean handled?" I snapped. "There were bodies in our walls." One detective gave me a tired look. "There's no evidence linking this to any ongoing investigation. Could have been an old crime scene. We're filing it under cold cases." "Cold case?" Alia cried. "That was fresh." They ignored her. No forensics. No follow-up. Just a warning not to go near the tunnel again. We were left in silence, standing in our own apartment, haunted and alone. That night I couldn't sleep. I sat in the living room, staring at the boarded hatch, and a thought entered my mind, quiet, sharp, and cold. They're hiding something. If the police wouldn't find out what really happened here, we would. The metal hinges of the hatch groaned as I forced it open. A gust of cold, musty air escaped, sharp, almost chemical, like rust and decay had been brewing there for decades. Alia pulled her sweater tighter. "Why would there be a crawl space in a 4th-floor apartment?" she asked. "I don't know," I muttered. "Maybe it's just an old storage shaft or utility tunnel." We grabbed a flashlight and shone it into the opening. A narrow tunnel led downward at a slight angle. The walls were made of stone, not concrete, and looked much older than the rest of the building. As if this passage had existed long before the apartment was built. "I'm going in," I said without thinking. "Wait, are you serious?" Alia's voice shook a little, but not with fear, with instinct. I nodded. "Just for a minute. I need to see where it leads." I climbed down, feet hitting damp earth. The air was thicker here, heavier. The flashlight flickered as I moved, revealing walls etched with deep scratch marks. Human? Animal? I didn't want to guess. About 10 meters in, I saw them, burlap sacks. 5, maybe 6. Stacked haphazardly, like someone had dumped them in a hurry. I called out for Alia, and she hurried down behind me. We approached the bags together. I opened the first one. And I swear to God, I stopped breathing. Inside were human body parts. Legs, arms, even a hand with a wedding ring still clinging to bone. The smell hit us at once, death and rot, sealed and waiting to be discovered. Alia screamed. I grabbed her and pulled her back. "We need to call the police," she gasped. And we did. But that night, we learned something far more chilling. Some secrets aren't meant to be solved by the system. Some secrets demand justice the hard way. I stood at the doorstep of our new apartment, keys trembling slightly in my hand. Alia, my wife, leaned against me with a smile that still held the glow of our wedding day. We had just returned from our honeymoon, tired, yes, but excited. This apartment was a wedding gift of sorts, handed down from my uncle who had left the country abruptly and offered us the place with barely any explanation. The building was old, built in the 60s, with cracked walls and a musty charm, but it stood firm in the heart of the city, nestled between modern towers like a forgotten relic. When we opened the door for the first time, a wave of stale air greeted us, laced with the scent of dust, aged wood, and something else. Metallic. Sharp. Almost like dried blood. I shook the thought off. The apartment was spacious. Wooden floors creaked with every step, and heavy velvet curtains blocked out the afternoon sun. Alia twirled in the middle of the living room, laughing. "We're really doing this," she said. "A fresh start." I smiled, but something deep inside me stirred, a strange unease I couldn't name. We unpacked slowly, exploring every room. The bedroom had an old oak wardrobe that seemed too heavy to move. The kitchen was small but cozy. And the hallway, it was longer than I expected, with a small hatch in the corner near the floor. Like a crawlspace door. Odd. I hadn't noticed that in the photos. "Alia," I called. "Come look at this." She knelt beside me as I opened the hatch. The air that rushed out was colder, damp, and foul. "There's something down there," I whispered. Neither of us knew then, but that hatch was the beginning of a nightmare.